I don't view this as Las Vegas. I view this as being part of Aspen. So this is a warm-up event for Fortune Brainstorm Tech, which happens in the third week of July every summer, and will happen this third week of July in 2019. You all are invited. This evening is meant to give you a little bit of a taste of what we do in Aspen. So our subject is mobility. I'm going to bring up three experts to discuss it with me: Scott Corwin, Tom Wilson, and Karen Francis. Please welcome them.
That was a really good comeback.
Well, no one wants to be a hater, right? Right, Tom?
I'm just not feeling the mountain air right now, but that's. But it was a good commercial.
It's a little drier.
It was a good commercial.
Okay. I wanna play a little word game with the three of you to start things off, because I think definitions matter, in particular in the technology industry, which is downright confusing, as we heard with LPGAs and all the different kinds of ASICs and semiconductors that we could have. And Karen, you told me something earlier in the week that was very meaningful to me. I've been trying to figure out for a little bit of time now what this word mobility really means, in the sense that industry people talk about it. And you said, well, there's the automotive industry, there was the automotive industry, now there's the mobility industry. What was wrong with the automotive industry?
Okay, having worked in the automotive industry, there was nothing wrong with the automotive industry. But I think what's happening now is that this isn't just about the vehicle that goes from point A to point B. It's about the people that move from point A to point B to point C, the vehicle that they might be in, the goods that move, whether they be pizzas or packages or whatever else there might be. And it's now a much bigger ecosystem of players that are seeing the opportunity that technology brings to enhance mobility, both for greater efficiency as well as greater safety.
Okay, and that is precisely what we're gonna drill into on this panel. Karen worked for General Motors for a period of time, and quite a few other interesting companies that were not automotive companies, right?
Well, and Ford.
And Ford, sorry, I didn't
yes.
know that.
Yes, I ran Ford's CVC group, if you know what CVC is.
I don't.
Corporate Venture Capital, back in the day. I was chairman of the board of a telematics company in 2000.
Ahead of its time, no doubt.
A little bit ahead of its time.
Okay,
yes.
And so thank you for that, because I think your message is that mobility is more than automotive, and that's relevant to the technology story.
Yes.
Tom, you appeared at a different Fortune conference last year, and you referred to...
It's the only people who would have me.
Well, even though that's not true, we're very glad to have you. And you referred to Allstate, which I think most people in the room would think of as an insurance company, as a customer-focused data company. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, obviously we're a consumer-focused company, and that's one of the reasons we're here. And what we do is protect people, and so the way you protect people is use data and technology today. So it used to be more restoration. Car got in an accident, we'd fix your car. Today we're connected to 8 million cars, 1.3 million of them buy insurance from us. We give them safe driving tips. So it's about protecting them using that data, and then we use that data to actually price them differently than we used to do it in the past.
So what, in your current business, I mean, keep going. What's different today versus what you see being different X number of years from now in insurance?
Well, we don't really think of ourselves as just insurance, right? So we sell identity protection, we sell cell phone coverage, tablets, cars, and we have a telematics company where we sell mobility solutions to people. We have our platform has changed. We think of ourselves as sort of a two-sided platform type, so we're looking at helping people share cars. There's a whole bunch of stuff we're doing differently, where we look at ourselves as trying to help our customers. Related to personal transportation is one of the areas, but we think about it as personal transportation. We think that's the single biggest economic opportunity in America today. A 20% reduction in the cost of personal transportation is worth $3,000 per household per year. Greatest way to improve the inequality in financial well-being. I don't necessarily think most people are, one talks about income inequality, but it's really about financial well-being inequality that we're worried about. And if we can improve their personal transportation system. So we have a whole bunch of initiatives going on using data, technology, our customer relationships to try to help people capture that money.
Say those statistics again one more time, please.
$4 trillion tied up in hardware called cars.
That's
$240 million today. $2 trillion to run it. $1 trillion indirect costs. 3 to 4% capacity utilization. 33% capacity utilization at peak hours. 70% of the time, one person in a car with 4 seats. If it was a manufacturing plant, you'd shut it down today, and you'd start it up next week or 2 years from now, and you'd make a ton of money. It's not going to happen that fast, but it is going to happen. And it needs to happen because we pay way too much money moving people around.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, I'm going to move on to Scott in a moment, but right now, I'm guessing Allstate's business model, revenues look similar to what they looked like, what, 5, 10 years ago. The image, the vision that you're painting, when does this happen?
Well, it depends how you want to measure it. So today, we have, at the end of last quarter, we had 96 million policies in place, of which 34 million were what you would call traditional insurance. Cars and stuff. That's policies versus revenues. Revenues are still it costs more to buy an auto policy than it does to buy a cell phone policy, right? But it's, our relationships are changing pretty dramatically and quickly. Like, I don't think this is, we're trying to lean into it as opposed to stop it or wait for it not to happen.
Good. Scott, I'm gonna feed you an expression that builds on what Karen was talking about, which is your firm has put a lot of effort behind understanding what you call the emergence of seamless intermodal mobility. Go, please.
So that is a build exactly on Karen's point. The definition of mobility is, in fact, really the movement of people and goods, and I think that the real transformation that we're talking about is all this innovation has fundamentally is leading to a disintermediation of a value chain that goes back to the time of Henry Ford 110 years ago.
Disintermediation means that the people who used to make the money and the people who used to pay the money no longer have a relationship with each other. Is that correct?
Well, it's leaning in that direction. It hasn't happened yet, right? Because you have companies like Allstate, where I remember, Tom, last year at this dinner, we sat next to each other. You said, look, there's still 250 million cars on the road in the United States. That's true, right? And that will happen for quite some time. But what we're really finding in this transformation is that we've redefined transportation. Right? So it isn't just cars and the way that we think of personal mobility, that we get in our car and we go where we're going. It's not personally owned. It's moving to a shared model. Eventually, it'll move to a shared and autonomous model. That's radically different in terms of what it means. But seamless intermodal mobility, when you start to pull the threads of autonomy and shared, you now are affecting actually all forms of mobility in a city. And we're now seeing the emergence. Think about in just the last few years. Started, I think, with Zipcar and the idea of fractional ownership, to the Uber, Lyft phenomena, to shared bicycles, to the emergence of on-demand shuttle buses like Chariot and Via, to e-scooters, and the adoption rates of these things are extraordinary. And what people are doing is they're voting with their feet and saying, we want different forms of mobility. So even public transportation has a risk of becoming anachronistic. And I mean, they have to defend and sort of reinvest and build to create viable alternatives. And it's sort of a really interesting challenge because we need viable light rail and viable public transportation to enable all sorts of outcomes around sustainability, equity, access.
So bless you. So far, everything that you talked about existed already. Bicycles certainly existed. Maybe electric scooters didn't exist, but scooters did. People shared cars, but not in the way that they are, right? So what I'm struggling to understand, and maybe you want to talk about it in terms of how you help clients think about this, is so there's more stuff now. There's more opportunities for mobility, for transportation. But what does it look like in the future? And who wins and who loses?
So you're absolutely right that many of these things existed before. But I think the single difference is it's now all interconnected. And there are digital platforms behind them that are enabling you to, the whole idea of seamless is you can go from point A to point B through multiple modes and actually pay a single e-fare in the future. Today we can sort of look at the length of time or the choices, but you can't actually ticket from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And that's coming. And the tech player, this disruption has been led by the tech players.
Yeah.
And what it's done is it's forcing the legacy incumbents to really rethink their business models in pretty radical ways. And to me, it's sort of the seismic plates are going through, we're going through a real tectonic shift.
I love this notion of an e-fare, a simple fare, but I have no idea how it's going to happen. Who's going to organize that?
Well, there are lots of players that are looking at it, working on it. Ultimately, I think it's going to require, just like Lisa talked about in terms of semiconductors, it's going to be an ecosystem of players. There's no single player that can pull all of that together.
So who leads it? Government?
Government has a role. I think what you're going to see is that there will be innovators that will be the catalysts. And the question is, how do these players all come together is very much on the table. And every one of them thinks, almost like Copernicus, that they're the center of the universe, and they're not. And I think that's a really hard reality.
Every one of who thinks that?
Whether it's ride-hailing players, auto manufacturers, digital tech players,
Good.
Everybody thinks that they are the public transit companies,
Yeah.
right? They all think that they're the center of this universe, and everything evolves and rotates.
Yeah,
often.
I think I would say
Please.
the consumers and economics will lead it. Like I mean, at least in the United States. I mean, in some countries the government may be more involved, but it's really, 40% of the people. I think I heard this the other day. 40% of the people who are in an Uber would have normally walked. And so somebody was complaining about, well, now we're not going to be healthy or something. I'm like, I don't know. Like, they get to choose. They decided it was cheaper and easier for them to get in an Uber. It's their life. It's their money. So they chose. So usage went up. I think what will happen is, that's why I think this personal transportation system, the Americans' love affair with a car is going to go away. $3,000 per year, $250 per month. I'm not going to be in love with my car. I don't need 1.9 cars per household. So I think the consumers will lead it, and I think, but it's the other part, we like to use this image of an iceberg. People talk about the autonomous vehicle, and we think that's the tip of the iceberg. Underneath that iceberg, you have, that's the vehicle, right? Underneath that, you got the infrastructure. So street lights are going to change, roads are going to change, parking lots, depots, services, gas stations, charging stations. Then you have all the system intelligence is going to change. We don't even have good data definitions yet.
But Tom, by the way, there seems, I think one of the early themes of CES is that the industry perhaps got a little bit ahead of itself on teaching the public to expect autonomous vehicles. It's going to take longer than people might have thought. Does anyone disagree with that on this panel?
No.
No, okay. But just to belabor this e-fares type of thought for one more moment, someone has to offer it.
Okay, so why doesn't Citi offer it?
Why not? Or
as an example.
Okay, because there are credit card payment services processing.
I mean, you were just saying a minute ago, like, how can you imagine someone paying for this and that and the other thing? Well, when I use my Visa card or whatever I use on a daily basis.
Your Citi Visa card.
My Citi Visa card. I'm buying all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff, right? So, which maybe 50 years ago I couldn't have imagined.
Yep.
Doing, buying everything in that way. And quite frankly, then if I go online and do it, I'm doing even more crazy stuff using my credit card. So what's to stop a city from saying, we're going to actually run the payments structure that's going to happen here?
Okay.
I mean, I think the interesting thing is that the exciting part of what's happening here is that it's anybody's game.
Yep.
Anybody can come in to this blackjack table and say, I'm in, I'm going to play, I know my assets, I know how to play this hand, and I want to be a part of it, which is very exciting and very different from even the last 15, 20 years.
You know, Adam, what I'm hearing, it's like I don't think there is an end game to lead to. I think there's just a transition to go through.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's happened with autonomous vehicles, they want to have this image in their head of all these cars moving around a city and stopping in front of your house, and you get in, they have this visual image of it. And I'm just saying, this whole system is going to change dramatically over the next 15 years. Don't know how.
Yeah,
but I know it's going to be better and cheaper.
I think it's a very good point. The people over a certain age, I mean, over the age of 30, know from all their lives and their parents' lives that it was a certain way for a very long time. We had cars and gas stations and freeways, right, and roads. And you're saying, get over it. That's not what the next X years are going to look like.
It's going to change. So I got to ask somebody in the city of Chicago, should they build another parking lot out at O'Hare? I said, well, how badly do you need it? And they said, well, you know, reasonably bad. So what's your payoff time? They said 25 years. I said, don't build.
No.
Like, you know, like, I don't know. Like,
interesting.
You know, if it was like 3, okay, maybe.
Karen, I want you to talk very briefly about the 3 technology companies that you're on the board of. But first, I want you to comment about the impact you see, having been in the automotive industry, of this young tech talent coming into the mobility industry.
So, all right, I was at General Motors in 1996. That's quite a while ago. I was 12 at the time. And, you know, most of the people entering the automotive industry grew up in Michigan, went to GMI, General Motors Institute.
Which was where Mary Barra went.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's fabulous, by the way. And, you know, that was a lifestyle. It was their grandfather had been in the business, their father had been in the business. It was something that you just did because you were used to it and you knew what it was. What we're seeing today, and I live in Silicon Valley, so what we're seeing today is unprecedented in terms of the energy, diversity, excitement, the type of talent that's being attracted to this absolutely life-changing, society-changing thing that we're all a part of in this. If you're in this room, you are a part of it, and I think it's fabulous. It's fabulous. I sit next to, you know, I call them kids, but kids at events who are 26 and saying, "Oh my God, I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah.
This is where I want to be." And I personally think with that kind of draw and talent, this will succeed. There are some of the smartest people possible working on this, and it will be fabulous.
Just to give people a sense of the breadth of what's going on, just tick off the 3 and explain what they are.
Okay, it's 4.
Okay.
So 4. So
gross.
there you go. So I'm the lead director of a company called Telenav, which is the in-vehicle embedded navigation company for Ford, General Motors, and Toyota. I'm on the board of Nauto, which is I'll say very quickly, a camera company, both internal and external. I'm on the board of MetaWave, which is a radar company, and I'm on the board of Quanergy, which is a LiDAR company.
Okay, what's their relationship with the big car manufacturers, and why aren't the big car manufacturers doing those things?
Well, they are. So for many of those companies, OEMs are investors. They sit at the table, they're board observers, they participate. There are lots of interactions in terms of NRE projects and things working together, which I think is absolutely a priority for OEMs to be working with these younger tech companies to learn the technology together. It's not going to be a situation where the technology is going to be perfected and then poof, it's going to plug into the car. There's got to be a lot more work in terms of the integration process that's going to happen to make this successful. So they're investors. They also are doing their own technology. So they're not stupid. OEMs know that they need to own this technology, and they are developing it on their own, but then they invest and participate across a spectrum of technologies.
So you're saying that the big auto manufacturers are going to be just fine?
Ooh, that's a different question. I think that I want to hear what Scott has to say. I think that some of them will be fine. I think that some of them will be left behind.
Which ones, Karen?
Remember, this is on the record.
No. Give me another glass of wine, and then I'll tell you. I think that their investments and appreciation of investing in other technology companies is going to be vital to them becoming as knowledgeable on where the technology is going as possible.
Scott, go ahead.
So the way we've thought about it is that value is fundamentally shifting in terms of the sources of value, and it's moving from the physical entity, the physical thing known as a vehicle that was a self-contained entity by and large, to if really people are consuming mobility on a per-trip basis, right? Then there are 3 new sources of value creation. And exactly what Tom and his team are doing at Allstate, which is really impressive, is they've begun to think about the value of all this data. So in our view, there are really 3 fundamental sources. One is the development of these autonomous drive operating systems. Look, there are 50 companies out there. They're investing heavily. Eventually, we believe there'll be a winnowing out.
Yeah.
Right? The world
History suggests.
The world doesn't need 50 autonomous drive operating systems, so we'll probably end up with a duopoly or some smaller oligopoly.
Right.
2 is today we spend 3.5 trillion miles traveling in the United States, where our eyeballs need to be on the road, and if in the future we increasingly go to autonomy, well, there's going to be increased consumption in terms of media and information and all this other stuff related to 5G. That's good for you. So there are whole sets of players thinking about in-transit experience and how they're going to brand and manage that experience. And that's different than I am a BMW owner and a BMW driver, right? 3rd is mobility management. And who are the players that get you from point A to point B? And we have a colleague, John Hagel, who leads the Center for the Edge, and he's argued that we will want trusted mobility advisors in the future, that we're willing to share our data and our personal information because they'll begin to curate what that experience is, right? So these are fundamentally different sources of value creation that are digitally derived, which is, I think, really the big change. And so...
And you give a good sense, excuse me, of how exciting, but also how messy it's going to be. I want to hear what your questions are for these 3 up here. So please, who has one? There must be one. Yes, right here, please. Can we get a mic to Patrick Bass? I saved you the introduction.
So yeah, Patrick Bass, ThyssenKrupp. So it's a question maybe more so in a form of challenge. So you said, who's going to solve this? Who's going to bring it together? I would throw out the challenge that, the people that are living with the pain, of course, are the people trying to move, but who they actually can, let's say, influence or make a difference to is the cities themselves. I mean, the cities are the ones that are living with the problem. And so how do you see that, and how do you see the opportunity for you and your respective companies to integrate with the cities to help solve the problem so that they are the attractive city for urbanization, which is obviously happening? So.
Scott, go ahead.
So we had a very robust dialogue earlier today. Salita Reynolds from LA is here, and Leon, we talked about that. One of the interesting things with all this innovation is essentially it's a supply side kind of move, and it's happening to cities, and arguably it's creating more congestion. It's not solving the problem. So there is a need to begin to think about how do you optimize all of these different modes. And one hypothesis that we've put forward is the creation of something known as a mobility operating system, which would be a digital platform that overlays on top of a city using market-based mechanisms. And you could use behavioral science and cognitive methods and essentially incent different forms of behavior to optimize supply and demand. And it's an interim solution till we actually do all of the infrastructure changes that Tom has, I think, very aptly highlighted, that what cities will look like 10 and 15 years from now will be radically different than that.
But it's tough with cities. Like, you got a bunch of politics going on. So we can do emission control testing with our OBD port device, but go try to shut down an emission control drive-through in a state where there's union jobs there, and I'm not against the union or anything, my father was in the union, it's just hard. The people don't want to do it. Or let's say you could, we were going to take one street in Chicago and turn it into a bike street. Everybody liked the idea because you wouldn't door the bikes and all that kind of stuff when you open your car and hit them, except the people who own parking lots on that street. They didn't think it was such a great idea. So I think it's going to be messy. And I think that's what we have to do is just, if eventually it'll work out, but it's going to take a while to get there.
Oh, please, yes, please. Please maybe come forward a little bit so we on the panel can see you. Oh, I see you.
Hey, sorry, hon. I'm back here in the cheap seat.
Introduce yourself, Stacy.
My name is Stacy Randecker, and I am co-host of the Flying Car Show. And thank you for this panel. It's been very informative. I am an advocate for lighter and safer at all times. I live in San Francisco and couldn't go outside because it was burning. We set the Arctic Circle on fire this summer. What are you and your entities doing to ensure that we are moving forward in a greener, more sustainable fashion as opposed to the old polluting ways?
This is sort of like the society and civilization question from earlier. Karen, do you want to take a stab at it? But quickly, please.
No, happy. Well, fundamentally, electric vehicles are the platform on which autonomy will thrive. So if you say that electric vehicles, getting rid of combustion engine is the direction to go, then everyone in this room who's participating in this drive towards autonomy is participating in this. So I think it's a very eco-friendly direction to go for vehicles. And I also think separately from the type of vehicle that moves, the efficiencies of sharing and people and much more efficient movement of everything we need will save all kinds of resources that we use today.
So I love this conversation. Thank you. I think you'd agree that again, I said it once before, the end point, the vision is quite beautiful. But the getting there will be quite messy. None of these things will happen quite the way we expect.
But I would say it will be messy, but enjoy being part of it.
Yeah.
Because we all sitting here are going to participate in one of the most fundamental structural societal changes known in our lifetimes. And that is super exciting. So don't look at it as messy and ugly and da-da-da. Thrive on what we're watching and the technologies that are coming out and the changes that are happening.
See how upbeat we can be, Michal, when we try? I do. So before I ask you to join me in thanking these three, I want to invite you to enjoy your dinner. My colleague Andrew Nesko will be back to say goodnight at the end of the evening. And for now, please thank Scott, Karen, and Tom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.